meat that they vacuum seal, so it's good in your fridge for like 3-4 weeks.
Okay, Brian, you want to do me a favor? And can we stop talking about meat and white meats? And we've got a show to do, okay?
All right.
Okay, hey everyone. God, we're back again, right? The show is Some Kind of Accident.
My favorite accident.
Your favorite accident.
Yeah.
Brian's favorite accidents. I'm your host, Greg. I'm here with my beautiful and lovely co-host, Madoka.
Thank you.
And today we have Brian Graf on the show. Brian, thank you for having me.
Thanks for
Thank you for having
me.
us.
Yeah. Welcome to your home.
Welcome to my show.
Yeah.
So I've known Brian for many, many years. Through my brother, I had the opportunity of meeting him. Brian is one of the most sought out managers in music today, a part of the Monotone Group, and he works with the likes of James Murphy and LCD Soundsystem. Prior to that, Brian was a producer and produced tons and tons of music videos and a lot of advertising photo projects for Partisan. And what else do you want to tell us, Brian? I mean, how did you fuck up? How was your...
So how did you start that in the music industry?
How did I get in the music industry?
Yeah.
It's a bit of a long story, but sometime after meeting you,
Okay.
I was working with a photographer, Tim Sasenti, a lot, and I was producing for him, producing for Partisan, which is, for those of you that don't know, it's Michel Gondry's production company. So he does... they have probably 30 directors worldwide, maybe a few more.
Right. Well, you talk of Endless Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Of course. I mean, and like New York videos. I mean, one of the greatest music directors of our time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So he started this production company that, reps 30, 40 directors. And so through them, they were repping Tim. And so I was producing some music videos, mostly for him, but for some others as well. And, one day I was watching, the Spike Jonze movie Where the Wild Things Are?
Yeah.
So I was watching like the behind the scene on that DVD. Back then you still had DVDs.
So you're like, who can I work for? Let me write down some names.
Research, right?
Do some research here.
So I'm watching the DVD on like a Friday night. It's like 1:00 in the morning or something. I'm watching the behind the scenes, and he's got all these, he's got these little clips of him in his apartment with Maurice Sendak, who wrote the book, and Catherine Keener's in the movie. And, it's just interesting. I've always been like a sort of film buff. Then I go to sleep, and my phone rings at like 8, 9 in the morning. And I'm like sleeping the next day, and my phone rings.
You sure you weren't dreaming, right?
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, I thought maybe I was. So my phone rings, and it's this producer at Partisan, Sasha Nixon, who I had worked with on some other music videos, and she was like, "Hey, can you be at Spike Jonze's apartment in like an hour or two?" And I was like,
and you're like, just like 6-7 hours ago, I thought I was in his apartment.
Yeah, and I was like, what's going on? And he's like, he's got a music video he like needs a producer for. Can you get over there? So I'm like, okay, yeah, where is it? Sure. So I go over to Spike's apartment, and it was for an LCD Soundsystem music video, and James Murphy's there, and they're like, "Hey, we want to shoot this video tomorrow," which is like, I don't know if you've ever produced a music video, but
it takes more than 24 hours.
Yeah, you don't generally get the call that's like, "Hey, we want to do this tomorrow."
Right.
And I was like, "Okay, well, what's the sort of scope?"
Well, the video was for drunk girls, right?
For drunk girls, right?
Yeah.
And so we sort of sit down, and like, they don't even really, they have a little bit of the idea, but they start like sussing out the idea there with me just like with a pad sort of feverishly like writing down notes. And they're like, "Okay, well, what if James and the band gets like, attacked by like these pandas?" I think Spike had this winter hat that I think he said his mom had got him. That was like you could pull it over your face and it looked like a panda mask. And it was like, oh, so we could like use all these panda masks, and it was like, okay, well, how many of the panda masks do you have? And he's like, well, I have one.
Well, like, I mean, there's about 7 or 8 people at LCD. So I think we need a little more than just one.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it ends up being like, I think in that video we probably had 35 pandas or something.
Wow.
And so
how did you make 35 pandas miraculously appear?
So like I sort of started calling people while we were sitting at the table, like, hey, can you go buy this? Can you go buy this? And so on set the next day, we ended up sewing, like you take a pair of black socks, you cut the toes off. Okay, that's yours. And like everyone who was an extra, everyone is like sewing these socks onto the hats. Yeah. We did the rest with marker, and then it ended up we used like you go to Home Depot and you get like painter's suits, for like the costume. So I mean, it's a long way of getting there, but so we shoot that video
the next day.
Yeah. You've seen the video before, right? It's a very fun video, and they're like chasing each other with fire extinguishers.
It was wild. I mean, we had people like driving to Pennsylvania to buy fireworks, and it was one of the craziest like productions, certainly in my career.
Right.
And
so after that shoot, you're like, I think I'm going to produce some more videos, huh? Was that the?
Yeah. I mean, I had been producing videos a decent amount at that point, and to me, I thought, okay, this is a one and done. It was great working with Spike Jonze and James and LCD and everyone there, but I'm a freelancer, so we'll see what where the wind takes us. And I got a call a month later. Well, actually, it must have been about 3-4 months later that James was winding up to do these LCD shows, and he was looking for someone to sort of produce like the live shows. And I was like, all right, that's not, I hadn't really done anything like that, like live concert production, but okay, sure, I'll hop into it. And those shows ended up being the last like LCD shows of that era. Right. It was like
where the record "Shut Up and Play the Hits" came from.
Right, exactly. So it was it was like this big sold out show at Madison Square Garden, and 4 shows at Terminal 5, and a film that was spawned out of that was shot, "Shut Up and Play the Hits," that I ended up being a producer on. And so James and I sort of just built this relationship that to him, I guess I was a guy who was able to just get what he needed done. And because LCD as a band at that time was winding down, their manager, this guy Keith Wood, who was sort of like this record label legend, he'd signed Smashing Pumpkins and Belle Sebastian and worked with all these great bands, was retiring. He was, in his 60s, and he was like, it's a hard job management. He was like, I don't want to be, I don't need to be chasing phone calls in the middle of the night anymore,
I mean, Madoka's worked in the music industry, and you've managed some artists before in the past, right?
No, I produced like project, but I didn't really manage. Yeah, but I know the types. Yeah,
it's great. But at in his mid 60s, he was like, I'm sort of ready to retire. He's a painter and he's a writer, so he was kind of ready to do his thing. And we were driving around one day, and he was like, hey, would you want to manage James? He's like, the band is done, but James is still DJing and writing and doing all these other things. And in my mind, it was like, well, that's a hard opportunity to pass up.
Of course.
But I was like, I've never done it, sure, but do I have the ability? And so he was like, it's logistics. He's like, you're already doing it. It's like, you've been doing the same thing. He's like, it's just a matter of that's all the job is. It's like, you have a client who needs to get something done, do it.
Right. And it must have been exciting because, it was a transition in James's career. And I think I remember from talking to you, James was interested in the restaurant business and
it was
like a lot of different things, which he ended up actually opening restaurants in, Four Horsemen. Which is a great restaurant.
I think that was actually a lot of the appeal to me because, actually when I was friends with your brother, he had known all these guys back in the day. His brother had this group of
misfits. Well, Bradley was a tattoo artist, and he was in the he was in the downtown LES music scene, so he knew a lot of musicians and just a lot of tattoo artists and different people. So
Yeah.
but this show isn't about Brad. Okay, fuck Brad. All right.
Oh, okay.
Brad, I love you.
He had a lot of friends. He had this sort of like group of exotic car owner friends.
Right.
And a lot of them, you could tell the guys who were like sort of the happiest were the guys who were doing just that, who were like, oh, I got a restaurant here, I do this here, and sort of spread their time
Just
out.
like dabbling into the
Right, exactly. Dabbling and sort of doing what they wanted to do successfully, but rather than the guys who were like, well, I go into finance or, I don't want to do some finance, but whatever they did to get there and sit in an office every day. And so James wanting to do all those projects was pretty appealing to me. It was like, okay, yeah, I mean, I'd love to be somebody who can sort of hop into your music career and look at the restaurant industry and this and that.
So did you answer back immediately, or did you have
I did.
That's good. That's good. So you played hard to get.
I did not. James and I had a conversation after, Keith sort of put us together about it. I said, okay, I'm interested, but, I don't know that I can do this. I don't know if I'm the right guy. I'd love to be, And then I also had this reservation that, I'd been producing so long with Tim Sicenti that I was sort of, bailing on him at a time when it wasn't perfect for his career, certainly. But at the end of the day, it ended up being something that was like, I think everyone in my life was like, "Are you crazy?"
Right?
Go do this.
Yeah.
And so I ended up taking the job, and sort of before I even accepted it, had this conversation with James that it was like, well, there needs to be like a management company involved or another manager who actually knows something about the music industry. So we went with Ian Montone. James had met with a couple of other managers as well. And so Ian, who he was originally the White Stripes lawyer. And so he moved from law into management to manage Jack White and the White Stripe. And now he's built a company with, Vampire Weekend and Jamie Foxx and a ton of other big clients. And so we signed up with him. That was like, okay, well, I'll manage LCD at Monotone with Ian. And another guy, Brett Williams, who's there, who I still work with every day. And that was sort of how I got into music, which, that was, I guess.
So that's your accident.
That's my accident. It's like, I was.
It sounds like a pretty fucking awesome accident, if you ask me.
But it's still an accident.
I mean, I had zero interest in getting into the music industry. Like, I was fully on a film producer path. Like, that was and I mean, most of the managers I end up working with or, colleagues and stuff are guys who are like on the road. They were tour managers. They were, one way or the other from the time they were like 15, they were like, I want to be in the music industry. So mine sort of just, I just sort of went with the wind. And
so that was like 10 years ago.
It was about 10 years ago. Yeah, that Drunk Girls video is July 2010.
So what was the first thing that James said to you, like the first day on the job? You want to talk a little about that?
I would talk about that. I'm trying to remember.
Or do we have to sign like an NDA?
No
an NDA or something?
No, I mean, I think there was sort of no starting point to this. Like almost from the time of that video, which then by the time the concerts rolled around and by the time I sort of got into the swing of things is a little over a year later. It was like we were running the whole time. It was like the concert meshed into the film, and so where I would have at the end of producing the shows said like, okay, well, again, see you next time.
Well, I can't imagine, because I mean, I've been to so many LCD shows, just getting tens of thousand balloons up in Madison Square Garden and having a balloon drop. Okay,
is that all you? Is that all your work?
Yeah. That's he blew up every single balloon.
Let me tell you, the balloons almost killed my music career before it started.
Really?
Yeah. So because Tim and I had done, like, it sounds silly, but we've done a lot of balloon work and photo shoots and stuff. Yeah. So I had these guys, the Balloon Saloon over on like Duane Street, I think they were. And I'd use them like for every photo shoot. And so we the shows come up and it's like, okay, we need, I think it was 8,000 balloons to drop from the ceiling of Madison Square Garden. And Madison Square Garden is, it's a union venue. And aside from being a union venue, it has all these guys who are like, this is how we do things.
Right. We gotta put the balloons up there. We're gonna get the fucking high-lows.
Yeah, and they had their balloon guy, and there's no like union balloon guy. They just had their guy that they wanted to use.
Right.
And I was sort of like this, like I was sort of rubbed the wrong way early on by this guy who, like, because I was like the young guy who didn't know like the ropes of MSG.
Well, what are they? Are they all like Teamsters at Madison Square Garden? Is that
I think there's multiple different unions. The Teamsters do the trucks, but this was sort of one of the promoter guys who was sort of like giving me a hard time early on.
So how did you get him? What are they called again? Like those lifts that go?
It's like a scissor lift.
A scissor lift. Right. So you had to get like, I would think from the base of the ground from Madison Square Garden to the roof, it's got to be at least over 60, 80 feet.
Oh, yeah.
Easy. So how did you get a scissor lift that high?
So the union guys do all that. But I end up saying, I don't want to use your balloon guy because I had some loyalty to this balloon saloon who I'd been using. And I was like, and they were like, are you really going to give us a hard time about the balloons? And me being like this little punk, I was like, yeah, no, we're using balloon saloon.
Right.
So I end up, okay, fine, balloon saloon. Morning of the show comes. You load in really early, for these things.
Of course.
And so I get there at, 7:30 or something. And I see all the trucks with the lighting, the sound of this. And like some of them are just not loaded in. And I was like, what?
But most of all, you're like, where's the fucking balloon truck?
Well, I'll tell you where the balloon truck was. The balloon truck had parked itself on the ramp at Madison Square Garden and said, we're not moving or unloading our balloons unless you give us an extra $5,000. Because they thought that they were going to be able to load in before the unions got there. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's a union venue, this whole... So anyway, I ended up sort of getting a gun put to my head by the balloon saloon. No good deed goes unpunished.
Right.
To use them for the show.
Okay, there you go.
So how has the last 10 years for you in the music industry? You've been like working and like I guess touring with James too, right?
Yeah,
like all over the world,
I don't sort of go on tour in the sense that like a tour manager would, where you go to every show or something like that. Yeah. But you go in and you go to Coachella, of course, and you go to some of the bigger shows and you pop in and out and you make sure that the touring team is obviously doing what they're supposed to be doing. And a lot of it is just hiring the right people and knowing that they're going to sort of take care of the band on the road. But yeah, it was the first 4 or 5 years seemed incredibly busy. And then LCD got back together and it was like, oh, right.
Okay. That was going to get a little busier.
That was going to get a little busier. And that was sort of a thrill because, I think when LCD broke up, a lot of people were like, oh, he's going to be touring. And I certainly never thought that. It was like,
I really thought he, was really sticking to like the Paul Weller jam, like motif, like LCD is not getting back together again.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely he definitely believed that.
But you always hear that story that, because I think James producing Black Star at the time or something, that David Bowie record.
He was working a little bit with David Bowie on that record, yeah.
And so to quote James, like, hey, you'll never make it, don't go there, whatever. But didn't David Bowie say to him, get the band back together?
I don't know. I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but I know that at some point, it's like anything. It's like, I think people forget that musicians or any other type of celebrity are human too, and it's like you have the right to say one day, "Hey, I don't want to do this anymore." 5 years later, say, "Hey, I missed that. I'm going to do it again." Yeah, I don't think it's much. I don't think everybody's looking for some like sort of complicated, it was a plan or it was something. It wasn't. It was just a guy who had a lot of music in his head and decided he wanted to get it out.
So how did the music business change in general, do you think, the last 10 years?
The music business has changed a lot.
It changed a lot,
I mean, the music story of the past 10 years is streaming. Like, that's really the big change. It was Spotify is now so powerful, those sort of these services that have come in.
Well, don't you think something has to be done? Can we have a conversation about that?
Sure.
No? Okay.
Yeah.
Because for me, I like to support bands as much as possible. And I feel that, when I hear stories of, bands that are selling millions of records and touring out, and I'm like, I got to check for Spotify for like $5,000 last month.
Sure.
Yeah. Come on.
Agreed. It's,
Okay.
it's a complicated issue because a lot of what you end up hearing is like what the artist gets after it goes through their label. And a lot of that spawns from the fact that these deals were made before Spotify was what it is now, or even Apple streaming or anything like that, And so maybe your deal wasn't great for that sort of thing because when your manager made the deal, it wasn't a viable source of income. You know what I mean? It was like, all right, well, this is something, so fine, we'll take a 20% royalty rate or something on it. And now that's where all the music's coming from, you're like, okay, well, the label's making a decent amount from that. And then it gets squished down to your royalty rate. I mean, to me, this is an unpopular take.
Right.
This is an unpopular take, but certainly I agree streaming services should be paying more. But to me, a bigger problem is that philosophically, music and other art are undervalued
Tremendously.
tremendously. I mean,